about improving the access arrangement process.
Thank you, Rebecca. So this is sort of the last section of our presentation today, so I will try to go through it relatively quickly so that we've got plenty of time for questions. So under the proposed amendments to the Access Code, the Task Force is proposing the ERA produce a framework and approach document prior to the access arrangement reset process for Western Power that sets out the services that will be regulated and the broad nature of any regulatory requirements. The objective of the framework and approach process is to agree up front on some elements of the access arrangement and to facilitate early public consultation and get early stakeholder agreement on the reference services that will apply in the next access arrangement period. Framework and approach will also assist Western Power to prepare its proposed access arrangement with reference to the incentive mechanisms and reference services included in its tariff structure statement for the next access period. So the framework and approach is sort of broadly going to set out the incentive mechanisms that will apply to Western Power over the period, the classification of any services, that is, which ones are going to be regulated, and the eligibility requirements for reference services, structure and charging parameters for each tariff, and a description of the approach for setting of each tariff in accordance with the network pricing objectives and principles. The form of control, whether Western Power is sort of under a revenue cap, price cap and or revenue yield, and the method for setting the service standard benchmarks for each of its reference service. Task Force considers that separating the approval of these aspects of the access arrangement process advance of the rest of the process would lessen the current time pressures on the ERA during the actionable access arrangement process. And this has the potential to reduce the need for extensions and the possibility that any final decision actually occurs after the start of the next period. I will now go on to the final slide. Thank you, Kim. And then we're proposing to make some actual changes to the process for making an access arrangement. So currently there's a three-step process where there's a draft, an issues paper, a draft decision, a final decision, and a further final decision. The Task Force is proposing to remove the further final decision, and we're hoping that by having the tariff structure statement and the reference services being sort of included as part of the framework and approach, that we can then have the price list information sort of aspect of it done at the end of the process. As noted by Mina with the technical rules, we're not going to propose prescriptive timeframes for each part of the process. We're actually just proposing to set minimum timeframes for consultation and only prescribe the date in which the final decision is to be made. These amendments will afford the ERA with the discretion to manage the approval process and the appropriate timeframes for public consultation being proportional to the issues being addressed. There's another element that we're sort of doing. We've included an additional formal step of allowing Western Power to provide additional information to the ERA in response to stakeholder feedback. This was to ensure that the ERA had sufficient information to address any issues in subsequent decision documents. Formalising this step does not remove the ability for the ERA to either formally or informally seek additional information from Western Power as part of the process. Rather, it's just intended to provide a transparent process by which unexpected and or complicated issues could be resolved as part of the process. And as I noted before, the draft and final decisions will include indicative pricing, but the intent of moving the formal price setting of the price list until after the conclusion of the final decision is to focus the decision-making process on formalising the allowed capital and operating expenditure for Western Power. And then once these have been set, it's a relatively easy final step to, after the final decision to apply it to the tariffs that will apply to the first year of the access arrangement period. This should provide, and we're sort of allowing this to happen so the final decision 3 months in advance of when the next access arrangement period starts, and a month to sort of formalise a couple of months to formalise the price list information, such that hopefully it will all be in place a month before the start of the next access arrangement period. So we think that these proposed changes with respect to the process will ensure that a final decision is reached 3 months prior to the commencement, and sort of will hopefully reduce the extensions that have been sort of prone to have occurred up until this point. On that note, I think I will pass back to Noel